welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. At least 197 Palestinians, including 58 children, have been killed as the ruthless Israeli bombardment of Gaza Strip has entered second week. Israel launched dozens of new strikes after its caretaker Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said an end to hostilities is not imminent. U.S. President Joe Biden says his administration is working with Israelis and Palestinians for a sustained calm. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed situation and phone calls with the Qatari, Egyptian and Saudi foreign ministers. India has registered over 4,100 coronavirus deaths and more than 281,000 cases in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 70 more people lost their lives to the virus, while more than 3,200 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.37 million lives and infected nearly 163 million people so far. The UN General Assembly is set to call for an immediate suspension of the transfer of weapons to Myanmar's military junta. A UN official said, unlike Security Council, the General Assembly's resolutions are non-binding but carry strong political significance. The move comes after Myanmar's military entered a town in Chin State, which took up arms against them 3 weeks ago. In India, at least 6 people have died after torrential rain and winds batter Karnataka state as the country braces for a powerful cyclone Tauktae. Authorities have evacuated thousands of people from low-lying areas along the western coast. The cyclone is expected to make landfall in Gujarat as early as Tuesday morning. And in football, Barcelona beat Chelsea 4-0 to win the Women's Champions League final for the first time in the club's history. Chelsea were on the back foot from the very beginning as Barca's possession-based game proved too much for the Londoners. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Almost 200 Palestinians, including 58 children, have been killed as the ruthless Israeli bombardment of Gaza Strip has entered second week. Israel launched dozens of new strikes after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said an end to hostilities was not imminent. More in this report. In over a week's savagery campaign against innocent, undefended Palestinian civilians, the apartheid Israeli forces have killed scores and wounded over 1,200 people. Israeli air raids on Gaza City flattened 3 buildings and killed at least 42 more people just on Sunday. Rescuers in Gaza are still struggling to pull survivors from under the rubble of the collapsed buildings. However, defying all norms of humanity, Israeli forces are now blocking the rescue equipment from reaching the emergency sites. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces used drones to drop tear gas on Palestinian demonstrators near the Beit al settlement. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said Israel is committing war crimes. He urged international pressure on Israel at a UN Security Council session as life becomes unlivable in Gaza.
Palestine have been suffering from such destruction for 15 years, but now the situation is getting even worse. This conflict has aggravated the suffering of the Palestinian people. We also haven't found any solutions. This is literally a tragedy of humanitarianism.
U.S. President Joe Biden says his administration is working with Israelis and Palestinians for a sustained calm. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed the situation in phone calls with the Qatari, Egyptian and Saudi foreign ministers. This comes after UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of an uncontainable security and humanitarian crisis. But the UN Security Council meeting, already delayed by Israel's ally, the US, resulted in little action. Pakistan regretted that the Council has been unable to even hold this meeting and to take action to halt Israeli aggression for so long. Pakistan's UN envoy Munir Akram condemned Israel's use of indiscriminate and disproportionate force, including aerial bombing. Norway, Tunisia, and China also expressed deep concerns about the rising number of civilian casualties, calling for an immediate end to hostilities.
The most urgent and pressing task at this moment is to cease fire and stop violence. What's equally important is to advance a just settlement of the Palestinian question on the basis of two-state solution. For all of that, the Security Council shoulders heavy responsibilities.
Meanwhile, the Associated Press top editor has demanded an independent investigation into Israel's bombing of a building in Gaza that was housing media houses. In Lebanon, demonstrations in solidarity with Palestinians were held for third day at the border with Palestine, while thousands of Jordanians took to the streets of the capital Amman, calling on the kingdom to scrap its peace deal with Israel. India has registered over 4,100 coronavirus deaths and more than 281,000 cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.37 million lives and infected nearly 163 million people so far. More in this report. The COVID-19 crisis in India has exacerbated the country's multi-pronged calamities emanating from its fragile socio-economic and political fabric. A top Indian virologist resigned from the government's panel of advisors on coronavirus variants weeks after questioning the authorities' handling of the pandemic. Indian doctors have been recording a huge spurt in cases of mucormycosis, an aggressive hard-to-treat fungal infection among COVID-19 patients. Residents living in the riverbanks are getting extremely anxious as more floating bodies keep appearing in Indian rivers. They said hundreds of bodies are being buried at the riverbank every day. Meanwhile, in the tough times, a food delivery network across Mumbai has been offering free lunches to help out patients on a budget.
When the second lockdown started, it was so hard to buy food because everything was shut down. These people give the food here, which is really tasty and fills our stomachs. And we can save money. Whatever money we are saving is going for better medical treatment.
In England, a cross-party inquiry group has demanded a public inquiry into whether Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to delay adding India to the travel red list of countries was influenced by his desire to start trade talks with New Delhi. As the UK has eased more restriction, health experts said people should avoid socializing indoors to prevent the Indian variant. Saudi Arabia has opened its land, air and sea borders today after more than a year of restrictions. The country announced that foreign vaccinated visitors arriving by air will no longer need to quarantine.
Thank God, after a year and a half of banning traveling, today we can travel. Thanks to God. Now someone can finish his work, whether it is for tourism or for business. And hopefully this pandemic will get to an end, so everyone can travel, God willing.
U.S. top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said, undeniable effects of racism have led to severe health disparities that especially impacted African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans during the pandemic. A new poll has showed that more than 80% of Japanese oppose hosting the Olympics this year, with just under 10 weeks until the Tokyo Games. In Pakistan, 74 more people have lost their lives to the coronavirus as the country's death toll approaches 20,000. The health ministry has reported more than 3,200 new cases overnight as the country's caseload tops 88,000. It said that nearly 78,000 people have recovered so far from the COVID-19. Meanwhile, more than 3.8 million doses of the vaccine against coronavirus have been administered so far. Pakistan has stressed the need for a reduction in violence and a responsible withdrawal of foreign troops from Afghanistan. Speaking to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the phone, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said a solution to the Afghan conflict is a shared responsibility of all stakeholders. He informed Blinken of Pakistan's concern over the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Qureshi called for an effective role of the U.S. in ensuring steps to help address the dire situation in Palestine. Both officials also agreed to work together on advancing the two countries' shared bilateral and regional interest. The UN General Assembly is set to consider a call for an arms embargo on Myanmar's military junta. A UN official said, unlike Security Council, General Assembly resolutions are non-binding but carry political significance. Introduced by Liechtenstein with support from EU, Britain and the US, the measure will be considered at a plenary. If approval by consensus cannot be reached in the full Assembly, 193 member states will vote on the measure. This comes a day after the army seized a small rebel town in western Chin state, which took up 3 weeks ago. The junta has killed nearly 800 people across the country in post-coup violence since February this year. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has begun his Nordic tour, in which he will be attending the Arctic Council ministerial meeting. The State Department said Blinken arrived in Copenhagen as a part of a Nordic tour from May 16 to 20th. Blinken will also be discussing the bilateral relations and the Nord Stream 2 with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The bilateral negotiations between Blinken and Lavrov will take place on the sidelines of the Arctic Council meeting. The Arctic Council ministerial meeting will take place in Reykjavik this week. Czech President Miloš Zeman has rebuked Russia's decision to put his country on a list of unfriendly states. The remarks come amid frosty relations between the two countries as a result of an intelligence dispute. In an interview, Zeman termed Russia's decision silly and said making enemies from former friends is a mistake. Tensions have spiraled after Prague accused Moscow of being behind a blast at an ammunition depot in Czech Republic in 2014. Prague also expelled dozens of Russian diplomats from the country. Russia retaliated by expelling Czech diplomats and put the country on the unfriendly list alongside the U.S. on Friday. Russia seeks to outlaw the political movement of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. A Russian court is ready to hear an extremism case against the Navalny political network. The court hearing comes as a sweeping crackdown against the political movement of Putin's most staunch critic. The Russian parliament's lower house is also set to debate a bill that would bar political activism as a part of the crackdown. The bill will prevent individuals from alleged extremist organizations from being elected lawmakers in Russia. Prosecutors in Russia had earlier labeled the Navalny network as extremist after staunch criticism of the Kremlin. Russian treatment of Navalny in jail has already prompted global outrage and criticism. Chile's center-right ruling coalition Vemos is expected to fall short of keeping themselves in control of the Constitution delegates' vote. According to the Electoral Authority Serval, the coalition of Chile's Vemos has secured just 21% of the votes. Independent candidates have emerged as the winners of the elections with 69% of the votes counted. Local media projected independents would win 45 seats, Chile Vemos 39, the center-left 25, and the far-left would take 28. The ruling coalition needs at least a one-third of the majority in the elections to push for a constitutional reform. Changing the constitution was a central demand to emerge from fierce social protests that erupted over inequality and elitism in October 2019. Since then, the popularity of the ruling coalition has greatly decreased owing to pandemic handling and other economic issues. In Peru, socialist presidential candidate Pedro Castillo and right-wing Keiko Fujimori are neck and neck just 3 weeks before the runoff. A voter simulation shows Castillo has 51.1% support and Fujimori 48.9%. Another poll shows Castillo leading Fujimori in voting intentions by 36.5% to 29.6%. Both have outlined new taxes and royalties for miners in their campaigns. Castro says he will raise taxes and royalties on the mining sector and renegotiate tax contracts of large companies if elected. Fujimori, contesting from jail over human rights abuse, has also pledged to distribute Peru's mineral wealth more evenly. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 6 people have died after torrential rain and winds batter Karnataka state as the country braces for a powerful cyclone TOUGHEN. Officials say the rainfall is accompanied by gale wind speed reaching 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. Authorities are evacuating thousands of people from low-lying areas along the western coast. The state government said nearly 300 are currently housed in relief camps. The cyclone is expected to make landfall in Gujarat as early as Tuesday morning. At least 2 worshippers are killed and over 100 injured after a grandstand collapsed in a synagogue in the occupied West Bank. Police said 650 worshippers were at the site for the start of the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. Officials say the event went ahead despite the lack of a permit and official warnings that the building zone was unsafe. The accident comes 2 weeks after 45 pilgrims died in a stampede at a Jewish site in northern Israel. The European Union has been urged to toughen its weak environmental targets for the reduced emission of carbon dioxide. European Campaign Group Transport and Environment said the bloc needs to shift to electric vans to cut emission and reduce fossil fuel usage. The group said the environmental targets of the EU are very weak and it needs to be stepped up to ensure the goal of 31% emission reduction. It has demanded that the EU should prevent van makers from building plug-in hybrid vans that rely on fossil fuel engines. The group said the EU should set a 100% carbon dioxide reduction target by 2035. Mexico's Andrea Meza has been crowned the new Miss Universe as the competition was finally held after a year's delay due to the pandemic. The 26-year-old Meza was selected from 73 other candidates representing their countries and territories. She was presented the crown by Miss Universe 2019 Zozibini Tunzi in a ceremony held in Hollywood, Florida. According to her contestant biography, Meza holds a degree in software engineering. The show was co-hosted by Mario Lopez and former Miss Universe Olivia Culpo and also featured a special performance by Luis Fonsi. Shares in Asia Pacific are trading mixed as investors react to release of Chinese economic data. The TAIEX in Taiwan fell more than 3% as it led losses among the region's major markets. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 dipped 1.27%, while the TOPIX index shed 0.39%. South Korea's Kospi traded 0.79% lower. Elsewhere, mainland Chinese stocks were higher, with the Shanghai Composite up about 1%, while the Shenzhen component surged over 2%. Over in Australia, the ASX 200 gained 0.31%. In Women's Champion League, Barcelona beat Chelsea 4-0 to win the final for the first time in the club's history. Chelsea were on the back foot from the very beginning as Barca's possession-based game proved too much for the Londoners. The Blues fell behind inside 30 seconds via an own goal and then got progressively worse. They conceded 4 goals in the first 36 minutes and were unable to come back despite a spirited second-half display. Chelsea coach Emma Hayes says her players were disappointed that the game was seemingly over before it began. In football, freshly crowned German Cup winners Borussia Dortmund have qualified for the Champions League with a 3-1 victory over Mainz. Mainz scored with a stoppage time penalty from Robin Quaison. Bayern Munich and RB Leipzig have already booked their spots for the Europe's Premier Club competition. In Italy's Serie A, Napoli beat 10-man Fiorentina 2-0 to extend their unbeaten run in the league to 8 matches. Napoli are now third on the points table, while Fiorentina stayed 13th. In the English Premier League, Tottenham Hotspur beat Wolves 2-0 at home to boost their European hopes. In another fixture, Crystal Palace beat Aston Villa 3-2 after a nail-biting contest. In Spain's La Liga, Atletico Madrid defeated Osasuna 2-1 to maintain their 2-point lead over Real Madrid with the match to go. Meanwhile, second-place Real also won their match 1-0 against Athletic Bilbao. Barcelona's title hopes are over after Celta Vigo handled them defeat at home. In cycling, Colombia's Egan Bernal has won the 9th stage of the GIRO d'Italia and also claimed the overall leader's pink jersey. The Colombian produced impressive acceleration at the end to beat Italian Giulio Ciccone and Russian Alexander Volosov. Only 7 seconds separated the three, with the Italian finishing second, while the Russian ended up third. Bernal secured his first victory of the season after pink jersey holder Attila Walter lost pace during the final ascent. The Colombian leads Belgian prospect Remco Evenepoel by 15 seconds. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.